my twin daughters, Lily and Nora, are 6 years old. This all happened last year when we were still living in our old place, the same house we'd called home for nearly 5 years. What eventually made us leave still makes my skin crawl. I moved into that house back when I was still dating my wife, Mia. We got married during my second year living there, and not long after, our girls were born. It was meant to be our forever home. But over time, the neighborhood began to shift. More noise, more turnover, fewer familiar faces. Still, we planned to stay put. At least, that was the plan until all this happened. Our house sat on a corner lot, and directly behind us, separated by a row of unkempt trees and overgrown hedges, was another home that we barely caught glimpses of. But on our right side lived a man named Anton. He'd moved in less than a year earlier. I'd only talked to him twice, and both times were brief and confusing. He spoke with a thick accent, and his demeanor was cold. Not aggressive, just off. 2 of his upstairs windows faced into our backyard, which wasn't ideal for privacy, but we'd gotten used to it. Oddly, I never saw lights on in those rooms, so I figured they were storage or unused guest rooms. One afternoon during the height of summer, the girls were splashing around in their inflatable pool while I was trimming hedges along the back fence. At some point, as I was walking toward our detached garage, I glanced up and caught Anton at one of his windows. He pulled back from the glass the moment I noticed him. A split second of eye contact, and then gone. It struck me as odd, but I shrugged it off. Later that day, as the sun dipped low, the girls went back out to cool off again in their little pool. Mia and I were in the kitchen. She was prepping dinner while I cleaned up. Then, suddenly, everything got quiet. Too quiet. A moment later, Nora came inside and said there was a weird flashing light from the neighbor's window. I followed her outside, and she pointed directly at one of Anton's upstairs windows. "It blinked again," she said. Lily nodded, saying it looked like a camera flash. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to panic them, so I helped them dry off and brought them inside. Then I told Mia what they'd seen. Her face went pale. Without hesitation, she told me to knock on Anton's door. So I did. His car was in the driveway. I rang the bell, knocked hard, several times. No answer. I stood there for at least 5 minutes trying again. Still nothing. I returned home and told Mia. She was immediately uneasy. We both knew what the kids described sounded exactly like someone taking pictures. But we had no proof. We couldn't accuse him based on a light. Weeks passed. We tried to forget. Then one night, well after midnight, Mia and I were in bed when we heard our side gate creak open and then softly shut. She sat bolt upright and whispered, "Go check." I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the backyard. I switched on the floodlights and did a full sweep. Nothing. No movement, no tracks. But I noticed something strange. Anton's backyard lights were on. I crept toward the fence just to peer over. The moment I did, he stepped out of the shadows, practically materializing on the other side of the fence. I jumped back. He asked, "Can I help you?" In that same thick accent. I asked if he'd seen anyone near our yard. He said no. Then, deciding to be blunt, I asked if he had been watching our kids through the window. He instantly bristled. His face twisted into anger, and he raised his voice accusing me of slander. He was loud. A little too loud for the quiet night. I apologized quickly and stepped away. No proof meant no confrontation. But inside, Mia was furious. "He's hiding something," she said. Then came the night everything broke. It was around 2 a.m. when Mia shook me awake. I was groggy, confused until I heard them, the girls, screaming. I bolted down the hall to their room. Lily was crying. Nora was shouting. I tried to calm them both, and eventually Nora said that just moments ago she saw someone at their window, and a flash. Every hair on my body stood up. I asked, what did he look like? But she didn't know. Just the flash. Just the outline of a man. I brought them into our bedroom. We pulled the covers over them. As Mia held the girls close, I crept to our window and looked out, straight into Anton's house. And there he was, peeking from behind that same window upstairs, staring out, just like me. Like a mirror, but warped. I exploded. I stormed outside, crossed the lawn, and slammed the doorbell over and over again, 10, 15 times. Nothing. Lights off. Stillness. I called the police, not to accuse him directly, but to get a report on record. I explained the situation, told them about the strange behavior, the possible voyeurism. They said they'd note it. Anton vanished after that. I stopped seeing him in his yard. I'd even sit out front some days, pretending to garden, just to see if he'd come out. He never did. Within a month, we were gone. We found a house in a nearby town, still quiet but better suited to raising kids. A place where I don't flinch at the windows every night. We still talk about what happened, the unanswered questions, the feeling of being watched in our own home. And I don't think I'll ever leave my kids in the yard alone again. Just a few months back, I moved into a small apartment downtown with 2 other women so I could start college. The building isn't exactly a dream. It's one of those old city blocks where all the units face a shared hallway, meaning, if your windows are open, anyone walking by can see straight into your life. Despite that, I didn't mind too much. The people on our floor were mostly other students, friendly types who minded their business. And with classes, a part-time job, and barely enough energy left to cook a proper dinner, I didn't spend much time worrying about small inconveniences. But one night last week, a Thursday, that changed. I was just getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth with my playlist humming in the background when I started hearing music. Loud pop songs. The kind you'd expect from a teen slumber party in 2008. At first, I laughed. In a city full of frat houses and rooftop parties, this kind of thing was normal. Maybe someone was blasting nostalgia hits with friends on the balcony. No big deal. But as I settled into bed, letting a podcast play quietly from my phone, another sound joined the music. Something much more jarring. Drilling. At first, I thought I was just tired and hearing things. I paused my podcast, sat up, and listened again. No doubt, someone was using a power drill nearby. I checked the time. 11 p.m. That didn't make sense. No construction crew works that late. I walked around the apartment, trying to pinpoint it, and realized the noise was loudest near my bedroom window. I slid it open, and that's when I heard both the music and the drilling coming from the same place, the apartment right next to mine. That was strange in itself, because that apartment had been empty since I moved in. No lights, no noise, no one coming or going. Just a dark, hollow space. I figured maybe the landlord finally rented it out and was having someone fix something inside. Still, drilling and blasting music well past 11 on a weeknight? I texted a friend, half joking, half annoyed. I even sent her a voice memo and a short video of the window. She was more serious than I expected and told me to call the police. No way that was legal in a residential building this late, but I didn't want to escalate things. I just wanted sleep. So I buried my face in the pillow and tried to ignore it. At around 1 a.m., the drilling gave way to hammering. Hard, rhythmic, thudding hammer strikes. I was exhausted and frustrated, but still told myself not to get involved. Just sleep. But then, sometime later, I didn't even check the clock. I snapped. I tossed on a robe and decided I was going to say something. The window to that apartment was wide open. It was just above the landing of the stairwell, so to see in, I had to walk down a few steps, just enough to peek inside. What I saw stopped me cold. Inside the room were 4 men, all clearly in their 30s or 40s, standing around with tools, their faces sweaty, their shirts stained. The hammering and drilling had stopped completely. Only the weirdly cheerful pop song from earlier kept playing in the background, and that somehow made the silence worse. All 4 turned to stare at me at once. I felt completely exposed. Standing there in my robe, no shoes, on the stairwell landing, lit by the dim glow of the hallway light. Their eyes locked on me, and not one of them looked surprised, just interested. There was something deeply wrong about the way they looked at me. 2 of the men walked toward the open window. They towered over me from above, staring in a way that made my skin crawl. One of them still held a hammer. The other tilted his head slightly, eyes scanning me from head to toe with the kind of look that makes you feel like prey. And then, they smiled. It wasn't friendly. It was slow, deliberate, smirking like they'd been waiting for this. I backed up the stairs slowly, never breaking eye contact, heart racing. The moment I was out of their view, I turned and sprinted to my door, slammed it shut, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I double-checked every latch. One of my roommates was out of town for the weekend. The other hadn't responded to my messages in our group chat. I assumed she was asleep. I crawled into bed, pulled the covers over my head like a kid, and tried to pretend I wasn't scared. But I was. Eventually, I drifted off. But it wasn't over. Around 3:30 a.m., I woke again, this time to nothing. No hammering, no music, no sound at all. The silence was heavy, unnatural. Something about it set off every alarm in my body. It felt like someone was standing on the other side of my window, not making a sound, just waiting. I didn't look. I couldn't. I stayed under the covers and willed myself to sleep, telling myself it was over. By morning, the window to that apartment was closed, lights off, as if the whole night had been a hallucination. But it wasn't. When I asked my other roommate, the one who'd been home, she said she'd heard noises too. She'd woken up multiple times but had been unable to move due to sleep paralysis. That confirmed it. It wasn't a dream. They were real. Those men were there. But who were they? How did they have keys to an empty apartment? Why were they doing construction at midnight, or pretending to? And what exactly were they planning? It's been a week now. I haven't seen them since. No lights, no music, no drilling. But I still check that window every night before bed, because I can't shake the feeling that they haven't gone far. I live in a fairly typical suburban town just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. My girlfriend Hannah and I recently started renting a modest 1-story home. Nothing fancy, but just right for 2 people. Cozy, with a decent-sized yard. Quiet street. Trees lining most of the roads. For the most part, peaceful. One side of our house borders a drainage reserve. The county calls it a water management zone. But really, it's just a patch of forest with a swampy dip. In the middle, on the other side, we have a neighbor named Glenn. He and his wife are in their 60s. Quiet, polite. We hardly ever see them. Straight across the street from us, there's a dense strip of woods that blocks another water basin. It's the kind of setup that gives you this nice illusion of seclusion. If you're into privacy, it's ideal. At least, that's what we thought. In the back of our property, there's a high wooden fence. Just one house sits on the other side of it, perched slightly above ours, meaning their second-floor windows have a direct view into our backyard. That wouldn't have been a big deal if it weren't for the people living there. This past October, while doing fall cleanup in the backyard, I noticed something weird. Every time I was out there, raking, bagging leaves, pulling weeds, two figures would be standing in that upstairs window. A middle-aged man and woman. They just stood there. Not waving, not talking, not even blinking much. Just staring. The first time I thought, maybe they're curious. The second and third time, it started getting under my skin. Hannah noticed too. She stopped going outside to help with yard work. She said their staring gave her this cold, crawly feeling she couldn't shake. I tried to brush it off, said they were probably just bored retirees. But the truth, they creeped me out too. One foggy afternoon, I looked up at that window again, and like clockwork, they were both there. I figured I'd try to break the tension. I smiled, gave them a friendly wave. Nothing, no movement, no blink, no nod, just those unmoving eyes locked on me. I turned away, pretending it didn't bother me. But when I glanced back a few minutes later, they were still there. Same positions, still staring. I gave up, went inside, and told Hannah. She had an idea. Maybe we should go introduce ourselves. Maybe they were just socially awkward. It sounded like a terrible plan, but she was insistent. So we walked around the block, up their driveway, and rang the doorbell. Someone answered, but not who we expected. The door opened just a crack, revealing only part of a face. It wasn't either of the people we'd seen in the window. This guy was younger, maybe early 20s, and the lighting inside was dim, like the whole house was running on shadows. We introduced ourselves politely. He barely responded. Didn't even open the door all the way. When I asked if his parents were home, or if anyone else lived there, he said flatly, no. When I mentioned we'd seen a man and a woman at the upstairs window watching our yard, he replied, "Don't know what you're talking about." His tone was dry, unfriendly. His face didn't even twitch. Feeling weirded out, we backed away and left. But as we walked down the path, I glanced over my shoulder, and there he was, still standing behind the half-open door, watching us leave. I couldn't shake that encounter. It was like something from a dream, one of those unsettling ones where you feel like you're being followed, but no one's chasing you yet. Later that night, I went upstairs to our bedroom. It's the only room on the second floor, along, with a small bathroom. I walked over to the window, the one that faces their house, and sure enough, there they were, the same two figures in the same upstairs window staring straight at me. I shut the blinds. That night, Hannah and I decided we'd plant a row of arborvitae trees along the back fence to block that view, but it was already too late in the season to do much planting, so we decided to wait it out till spring and avoid the backyard in the meantime. A few nights later, around 1 a.m., we were woken by a sound downstairs. It was a slow, deliberate tapping. Not on the door, but on the glass. Someone was knocking on our living room window. The blinds were closed. Thank God. I crept downstairs, heart pounding, and flicked on the backyard light. The knocking stopped immediately. I stood there frozen, unsure whether to pull back the blinds or just leave it alone. I decided against looking. I didn't want to see who or what was out there. I went back upstairs and told Hannah I had scared someone off. I lied. I didn't want her to be afraid, but I couldn't sleep after that. Nothing happened for the next 2 weeks. The window across the fence remained empty. No watchers, no strange behavior. We thought maybe it was over. Then last night, around 11 p.m., we heard yelling. Muffled at first, but intense. Angry voices coming from their house. The windows were closed, but we could still hear it clearly. I opened our bedroom window slightly. The shouting was coming from inside their house, no doubt. Something loud, chaotic, violent, and then silence. Just like that, it stopped. No doors slamming, no footsteps, just gone. We nearly called the police, but we hesitated. What would we even say? I don't know what's happening in that house behind us. I don't know who those people at the window are, or if they're even the ones living there. But I do know this. Something is very wrong there. And winter's just beginning. What would you do if you were being watched? From a backyard stalker hiding behind drawn curtains, to strangers hammering away in the dead of night, to ghostly figures staring from windows with no explanation. These 3 true inspired tales explore what happens when home, the place meant to keep us safe, becomes the stage for something unsettling. Whether you're a fan of suspense, real-life horror, or psychological thrillers that crawl under your skin, these stories will grip you with their eerie familiarity and creeping tension. Have you ever had a neighbor that made your skin crawl? A night that didn't feel quite right? Then you already know how quickly normal can turn into nightmare. Share these stories with someone who always double-checks the locks at night. And if you've ever experienced something like this, maybe it's time to talk about it. You're not alone.